Drive Live Formula One.
Hello and welcome to qualifying ahead of the Hungarian Grand Prix, the 11th race of the 2023 season. We're about to find out who will start on pole position for tomorrow's race. Will it be the usual contenders, or will, because we have a new format this afternoon, it be someone else? With me to talk us through the next 60 minutes of qualifying is our lead commentator this weekend, Chris Hartley, the former Williams F1 driver Jack Aitken, and the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. We've got quite a team to talk us through it this afternoon. Looking forward to this one. And Jack, there's a little bit of uncertainty, I think, when it comes to who's going to shake out where. But with this new format, do you think we're going to see some big scalps go early on? Of course, the teams and drivers being told which tyres to use in which session, the hard tyre in Q1, the medium in Q2, and right at the sharp end, it'll be Q3 on the soft tyre this afternoon. What do you think might happen in this first part?
So I think what this means is Q3, for those that get through, I think will shake out more or less as you would expect, because they always get a lot of experience on the soft tyre, and that's traditionally the tyre that is used in qualifying. It's the early stages of qualifying where we may see some surprising results, because you're using the hard tyre, which I can't remember the last time a hard tyre was used in qualifying. It's a bit of an odd one, really. And because there's so few hard tyres to use this weekend, as with all weekends, it's only two, very few teams have actually tried the hard tyre in practice so far this weekend, so they don't really know how it's going to react. How long is it going to take to warm up? Will they have to do multiple laps to get the best out of it? How's that going to affect the traffic with all 20 cars on track? It could be quite a mess. And we saw in the free practice sessions already that teams jumping between the different compounds, drivers weren't always able to make a step with the softer compounds to go quicker, and between teammates some were able to do it, some weren't. So yeah, in Q1, Q2 we might see a bit of a shake-up. But
we like this, we like unknowns as we head into qualifying, because 2023 has become a little bit predictable, Chris, hasn't it? With our reigning world champion Max Verstappen often right up there at the top. But we've got dry conditions this afternoon at the Hungaroring. We had rain yesterday during FP1, rain overnight. Now it is a lovely 26 degrees air temperature, track temperature 45 degrees. Looks like it's going to be set fair. So as Jack said, maybe we'll see a bit of a difference in Q1 and then into Q2, but we're thinking Max Verstappen's still got this in the bag, even though he's been a little bit vocal on the radio, hasn't he, with a few problems with the rear end, not quite as comfortable in the RB19 as perhaps he normally is.
No, absolutely. A couple of times where he was complaining about a complete lack of grip in the car when he was still up there. He was second quickest, but he wasn't dominant in any of the sessions at all so far this weekend. And there's the other question, we obviously had the weather yesterday, played its part, 2 red flags in the first free practice session, and it was dry for free practice too, but it was much cooler than it is now. So they've only really had, in similar conditions to qualifying, this one session a couple of hours ago. You've also got slightly different compounds of tyres than they had last year. There's less tyres, having to use the hard, the medium and the soft, as you said, but the 3 tyres, the softs, the mediums and the hards, are slightly softer compounds than the ones they used last year as well. And you've got quite a few teams, most teams, that haven't used the hards today, so they might have used them yesterday, but in today's track temperature, which has been between 44 and 48 degrees, most of the top teams haven't tried these hard tyres at all. We've had a couple like AlphaTauri and both of them and Lance Stroll that know what it feels like, so that's another equation. And you need to build up temperature in the hard tyres to make them work, so the track's going to be pretty busy, so it could be quite frenetic. You could find drivers tripping up over each other in traffic. Oh,
lots to look out for. And in the last hour or so, we have heard that the fans who have made their way to the Hungaroring this afternoon to enjoy the action, they might not have seen as much F1 track action this weekend, given this alternative tyre allocation format, but they're going to see plenty more action in Hungary over the coming years. They've extended their contract to 2032. Jack, this is a circuit that drivers tend to like. It's a little bit of a karter's track. Do you think the drivers on this grid will be pleased that they'll be coming back here for quite a few years to come?
I think so. It's not what you'd say is an absolute favourite for the drivers, but they definitely enjoy the challenge of this track. It's one of the tracks that offer the most corners per kilometre probably of the entire calendar outside of the street circuits, and qualifying is always quite a thrill here. So I think this session in particular they're going to be looking forward to.
Well, the session is about to start. We're 10 seconds away from a green light as the cars start to fill up and queue in the pit lane. I'm going to hand it over to you guys in the commentary box. Chris, let's go. It's time for qualifying for the Hungarian Grand Prix.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's as usual in terms of the way the session is split into 18 minutes of Q1, 15 minutes of Q2 and 12 minutes for the final part of qualifying. The slowest 5 will get knocked out of this part of qualifying. And just to give you a time sync, we've got 17 minutes and 40 seconds, 39 seconds, 38 seconds left to go in the session. McLarens have looked pretty good here on short run pace, on medium tyres, on soft tyres. We know all about their exploits at Silverstone, Jack, last weekend, but on a very different circuit at Silverstone where they scored 30 points. More points than they've scored in 40 Grand Prix, more points than they've scored in the first 9 races of the championship season. But this is a very different circuit. We weren't necessarily expecting to be quite so competitive, but it does look like they've got a chance of maybe not fighting for the front row of the grid, but certainly being up there fighting for the 3rd or 4th place today.
It has looked promising for them, and I think, we've not had a full picture of the grid so far this weekend because of the reduced running with fewer tyres available to the teams and the weather that played out in FP1. So there are some unknowns here, some question marks, but they do look strong. Both Piastri and Norris have been up there. And the other thing is that Verstappen hasn't been his usual completely dominant self, hasn't topped either of the sessions. And in FE3 this morning, when he did get a clear run at it, he was complaining about a lack of grip, particularly suffering in Sector 2 compared to Hamilton, who was the quickest. It's hard to believe at this stage that anyone other than Max could be on pole, such as the dominance been, but maybe this could be the track, this could be the weekend with upgrades that Mercedes could topple them. Maybe, hopefully.
Maybe, yeah, well, we'll see. With Lewis Hamilton going quickest in the 3rd practice session, and by a decent amount as well, by 0.25 seconds. It was a really good lap from Hamilton. Others were pretty close to Verstappen's time as well, including his teammate Sergio Perez. There's a good lap from Nico Hülkenberg in free practice 3 that saw him go 4th quickest. He's been generally outshining his teammates in qualifying so far this year. Perez then can, for the first time in 6 Grand Prix, he get out of the first part of qualifying. He feel that he really has to. He didn't get the weekend off to a great start when he binned it on the outlap of the first free practice session yesterday, and free practice 2 wasn't much to write home about, but he looked pretty decent this morning, to be fair to him.
Quite a lot of pressure on Sergio Perez at the moment. Obviously, Daniel Ricciardo coming back into Formula 1, joining the AlphaTauri outfit, a team that he's obviously raced with in the past, where he sort of started his F1 career proper back when it was called Toro Rosso. Having him on the grid, has that directly put the pressure on Checo? I'm not sure. I think pressure was already there, even though Christian Horner thought it had slightly come off Checo's shoulders in recent weeks and months. But yes, he needs a good result this afternoon. This is absolutely paramount for his career, because whilst Christian Horner says that Red Bull are totally sewn up when it comes to their drivers for 2024 with Max Verstappen and Sergio, we know that Formula 1 is a ruthless business. We've seen that in the last week, and it could well be that Daniel Ricciardo gets that 2nd Red Bull seat even next year, not just the 2025 dream that Daniel's been talking about.
I don't think I'm being particularly contentious when I say that we won't believe a word that Christian says about the lineup being sewn up for next year. We've seen time and time again Red Bull don't stick to their contracts necessarily all the time. They'll do what suits them as they see fit with their drivers, and they do have the freedom to do that. We've just got the first laps filtering through now. Perez is quickest at the moment with a 1:19.29, just ahead of Lando Norris, but that is now surpassed by the Alfa Romeo of Bottas.
Bottas might be worth watching this session, because he was one of the drivers that did try the hard tyre out in that last practice session, and he got to within just over half a second of his own best time on a softer tyre, so that was pretty impressive, and both the Alphas were thereabouts. He's just gone quicker than he went this morning on the hard tyre as well. So into the 118s, Bottas goes quickest with a 1:18.8. That is a decent lap, I reckon.
And Guan Yu Zhao is up there as well in P4, quicker than both of the Ferraris at the moment. Verstappen does go P2 with 1:18.89, so still slower than Bottas, but pretty close. Piastri into 3rd place now. About 3/4 of the grid have set a lap time now. Just waiting on both Williams, both Mercedes and the Haas as well.
Yeah, just not being in the bottom 5 is obviously the key element here. Hulkenberg goes up to 9th place with a 1:19.5. So Bottas quickest, Verstappen 2nd, Piastri 3rd on his first lap, then Perez 4th, Norris 5th, Joey in 6th, Leclerc 7th, Alonso, Hulkenberg and Ocon round out the top 10. Sainz is 11th, Gasly 12th, Stroll 13th, and then 14th and 15th. In the early stages, Magnussen and Tsunoda. Right, Hamilton on a push lap here, and he was did try the hard tyre on Friday, but not earlier on today. It looks a decent effort this as he comes out of turn 14 in the Mercedes. 8 times a pole sitter here. He comes through and he goes up to 3rd place with a low 1:19, 1 minute 19.184 seconds. That's still 3.5 tenths of a second away. Just behind him, his teammate goes a tad quicker. Russell goes 3rd.
The interesting thing to look out here with the hard tyres is we're just going to get a replay of Kevin Magnussen. Let's see, and there is our first track limits deletion of the weekend at turn 5 on the exit. Just put 4 wheels over the white line, and that wasn't being policed in the practice sessions. It will be policed for the rest of this weekend, so drivers are going to have to get sharp to that. I was going to say, with these hard tyres, the interesting thing will be now to watch the 2nd and 3rd push laps, because normally with a soft tyre, the best hit that you're going to get from them is instant. It'll be the first lap, and then you're kind of on a declining line of performance after that. The hard tyres, they're that much more durable, and it can be harder to warm them up. So actually, as they get hotter and hotter through this session, we might see times dropping further and further.
And also the cars will be pretty heavily fueled, do you reckon, so that they can stay out for a bit longer?
Yeah, quite possibly. We could see a difference of strategy. Some of the lower midfield and bottom end teams might go for 2 sets, whereas the top teams may try and use the tyre all the way through the session.
Alex Albon has just put the Williams on his first lap up to 8th place. His teammate Logan Sargent is just a few seconds behind him on the track, and he goes 12th, and that pushes Carlos Sainz out of the top 15 down to 16th place with Stroll, Tsunoda, Ricciardo and Magnussen, the others in the drop zone at the moment. Ocon is on the drop zone fringe in 15th place, so 1 minute 19.572 is the target time to beat, as Perez goes 2nd quickest with a 1:18.444. He's only 26 thousandths of a second behind Bottas. You've just got 74 thousandths of a second now between the top 3, Bottas, Perez and Verstappen.
Bottas is on a pretty good lap himself, so it looks like he will improve the benchmark here if he can get a good final sector together. Stroll popping up into P12, Piastri having a lap time deleted, so he's dropped all the way into the drop zone. He needs to get a lap in here. On board with Alonso coming through the last corner, struggling with a little bit of understeer, but it's not terrible. On the gas, a little bit of AstroTurf, and he's up into P5 with a 1:19.1, 3.5 tenths off. And we are seeing a few more times being deleted now, so they are hot on this, and this is what we thought might happen. Because they weren't being policed in practice, we saw a lot of drivers getting away with it and maybe not being as strict with themselves as they should have been in their preparations for quali.
Yeah, Oscar Piastri, the latest driver to lose a lap time, wasn't his best lap time, so for now he stays in 4th place. And Alex Albon has a lap time deleted, and that is his one good lap time so far, so that's going to drop him back to the bottom. And Logan Sargent likewise, so both the Williams have had 1 lap, they've lost both of those laps, and they are down to last and last but one now, because with 10 minutes to go, they've yet effectively to set a lap time. And there's another one, Zhou Guanyu now is losing his lap time, so absolutely what you said here, Jack, it's going to be a nightmare. And I suppose with the hard tyre not being as grippy, you're more likely to run wide, aren't you? More likely to go over the track limits. Especially
for those who haven't tried the tyre before, as we say. But Bottas is he did lower the benchmark, not by much, but ever so slightly, so he's still P1. That's a brilliant lap by him to beat both of the Red Bulls. I'm just going to get a replay now of Albon, and it seems like this will be his track limit violation, a big chunk of curb at the apex, which just unsettles the car, and it's millimetres out. It is very fine margins, but it was out, so that's a deletion. Now looking at his teammate in the sister Williams, Logan Sargent, on the exit of turn 11 at the other fast corner here, and that is also out as he's using all of the curb and then some, bottoming out quite heavily.
But looking at that, Jack, it almost seems like he's disadvantaged by doing that. Does that actually give him an advantage running off like that?
Yeah, it'll be close. That's certainly what some of them would argue, saying that when you're that far out on the dirty curves and it being so bouncy and bumpy, it's not going to be an advantage. But the new line that the FIA are taking is that it's hard for us to tell if it's an advantage or not.
Let's stay calm, but come on.
Charles Leclerc being a bit frustrated. His teammate Carlos Sainz, so he's just popped in a lap, which has put him into 8th place. And Verstappen seeing if he can improve upon third. Of course he does, he goes quickest, so he gets ahead of Bottas by just over a tenth of a second with a 1:18.658.
That Charles Leclerc radio, I was waiting to hear the intonation on the come on, because it could have been an encouraging one, but obviously consternation with the team as Alex Albon pops it up into P8 there.
I wonder if that was about track limits or if that was something to do with the running order between the Ferraris, because Leclerc hasn't had a lap time deleted, and they are running astern, the Ferraris, aren't they? And there were some issues around that at Silverstone.
That did feel like it was directed at the team, didn't it? Very much so. Leclerc is 13th at the moment, so he's only just in with his lap time of 1:19.414. He's in by 10th of a second at the moment. Hulkenberg is the one on the cusp in 15th place with a 1:19.550. Albon's got himself back in. Hopefully he keeps the lap and doesn't lose it to track limits, so he's back up to 8th place now. Ricciardo goes up to 7th place. That's a decent effort, isn't it?
Welcome back to Formula One.
Well, Tsunoda's about to put one in too, and he's a couple of tenths up on Stroll, who is the benchmark for the drop zone at the moment, so it could be a decent lap here too. Let's see how the AlphaTauris compare. And it's a good lap from Tsunoda too. He's up into P4 with a 1:18.9.
So both the AlphaTauris have come in and put on new tyres. Everyone else is still on the first set of tyres.
There's quite a lot of them in the pits now though, so in the last 5 minutes or so we could see more of them coming out. It doesn't seem like warm-up is a big issue for the hard at the moment. The first 2 laps seem to work pretty well with these hards.
And also the track will be rubbering in. We've had an F2 sprint race in between FP3 and qualifying, so the track is going to get faster as well, so that may play into it, I guess, with the timing of when to then come out on these new hards.
The gap between Tsunoda and Ricciardo, for those interested, is about just over a tenth at the moment, so pretty close, but it is very tightly bunched at the moment, especially in the top 10. There's only less than half a second covering the top 10 at the moment.
Right, Esteban Ocon now goes on the attack in the Alpine. He needs to, because he's last but one at the moment in 19th place. So he goes on a charge lap here down the hill into the left-hander at turn 2. He goes, all looks neat and tidy so far, and there in 4th gear, drops down the hill. 5th gear, over 130 miles an hour to the foot of the hill. Then he begins a climb up then into the very fast left-hander at turn 4. Kisses the curb, kicks up a bit of dust into the right hand, almost hairpin at turn 5, but it's a very quick corner still at almost 90 miles an hour over the crest. Down towards the chicane now, 3rd gear through there, rattle over the curbs, you're up to 4th before you get on the exit almost, and Pierre Gasly, his teammate, has just done the absolute best first sector as well. He's around about 7 or 8 seconds behind Ocon, so the Alpines both going on the attack here to get themselves up the order. Gasly's just in at the moment in 14th place, but as I say, Ocon, he's out. He's 4 tenths down after 2 sectors, which means he's on for around about a low 1:19, which should put him in and around 10th place. See what his last sector is like as he comes into turn 14 now. Personal best for Gasly in the 2nd sector as well. Ocon then about to come through. I think he's about to get himself into the top 15, easily so. He goes 4th quickest.
It's a good lap from Ocon, and Gasly, as you say, he's on for a really good one as well. Out of the last corner, sparks flying up, and he just misses out on P1, 800ths of a second off Verstappen to go P2. But that's good performance from the Alpines, who are looking a bit in trouble this morning in FP3.
Yeah, well, Gasly was quick yesterday, wasn't he, in the dry and free practice too. Cooler conditions, he was 3rd quickest. 5 minutes to go then, 4 minutes 54 seconds to be precise. Verstappen in the pits quickest, Gasly 2nd, Bottas in the pits 3rd, Perez 4th, Ocon 5th, Tsunoda in 6th place in the pits, and then 7th and 8th are the McLarens of Norris and Piastri. Russell 9th, Ricciardo 10th, Alonso 11th, Albon 12th, Sainz is 13th, Hamilton is 14th, half a second off the pace, 15th is Joe, and then out of the top 15 at the moment are Leclerc in the Ferrari, Stroll in the Aston Martin, Hulkenberg in the Haas, Sargent in the Williams, and also Magnussen in the other Haas, with Leclerc now going on a really important lap here, Jack, to try and drag himself into the next part of qualifying.
Yeah, it wasn't very convincing into turn 1, a little bit of bouncing through the first braking zone. He's missed the apex at turn 2, but that's not necessarily a deal breaker through turn 3, and it's looking a bit cleaner now, and he's actually purple through sector 1. It's a great first attempt, using all the curb but staying over the track limits, both at the exit of turn 4 and turn 5, going into the tight chicane now. A little bit of curve, not too aggressive as we've seen from some of the other drivers, and pitching into 8 and 9 now. Ferrari clearly working a lot better. Both of the drivers were struggling with the rear end of that car through practice, but they seem a bit more settled now with a new set of hards, and he's just right on the edge of the white line on the exit of turn 11 into the final sector. He's half a second up on the drop zone at the moment, so it's looking good at the moment. Perez pops into P1 in the meantime, 3/10 ahead of Verstappen, and coming through the last couple of corners now, and everyone's going quick. Zhao's gone first with an 18.1. That's a blistering time from the Alfa Romeo. Bit of opposite lock from Leclerc as he gets on the power and up into P3.
Yeah, Zhou Guanyu was absolute best in the middle sector, a pretty decent final sector as well, to go top of the times, that 1 minute 18.143. And Lance Stroll has just put the Aston Martin into the top 10. He goes 7th quickest. His teammate Fernando Alonso goes 4th quickest with a 1:18.5. So Albon's on the cusp now as Piastri becomes the best McLaren in 4th place. Albon's 15th. He's just in there, but Sainz is out. Hamilton's out at the moment. Hulkenberg, Sargent and Magnussen, and we've only got 2 3/4 minutes to go. Carlos Sainz now goes on a really important push lap here. He's about to come out of turn 13. He goes from the right side of the track to the left, to the right-hander. He comes out of the final turn at turn 14. Can he get himself in? He's pushing all the way onto the curbs, and yes, he does get in. He goes 4th, and that now puts Albon out of the top 15.
I tell you what, there's going to be a flurry of times across the checkered flag here, because the bottom 7 or 8 drivers have all gone out on an outlap with a fresh set of hard tyres. Norris has just had a lap time deleted, it looks like, for track limits at turn 5, and that's put him right in the danger zone. He will have time for one more lap, but he's down in 13th at the moment. We're just getting a replay through turn 4, no worries there, into turn 5, gets an early apex, perhaps earlier than he'd like, a bit of oversteer, and it's very close on the exit. That's a marginal transgression, but over the white line it was.
So now what's in your head as a driver, Jack, because you've probably only got one more chance. You've got to kind of play it safe. You can't afford, like Perez did in Austria, to lose another lap, but you've got to push hard still to make sure you get in there. I mean, he should be able to go at not quite 100% with that car and get into the top 15, but it's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think he'll hold back too much. Lando's looked pretty confident so far this weekend, and now we're just seeing the fight for position going into these final laps. Verstappen at the head of the queue, and Hamilton, and I think that's Leclerc, fighting over who can follow him through. The Haas as well, trying to get in the mix and defend their position into that last corner. Everyone wants to launch a lap with just over a minute to go before the checkered flag falls.
Yeah, world's slowest Formula 1 race at the moment. They're all creeping into the final corner, almost stationary.
They're taking the clutch, they can't...
Yeah, actually stopping. Yeah, they're rolling into the final corner to just try and give themselves some space with 58 seconds left on the clock. This is going to be tight. It's
a nightmare, because this is the last thing you want with those hard tyres. They're losing temperature all the time. You've got a massive braking zone into turn 1 where you need full commitment. And we're just watching Hamilton now, who finally gets to launch, and a flurry of cars following him behind. They're all quite cramped to get over the line. But Hamilton onto the brakes into turn 1. Doesn't look like any major issues. He gets to the apex okay. Clean exit of traction as well. So
Verstappen's just set the absolute best first sector as well. He's already in, he's in 7th place, but big lap this for Hamilton. He's not in that cut-off zone at the moment, is he, Jack? So this is pressure, but if there's anyone out there that knows how to deal with pressure, it's this man, isn't it?
Oh yes, and everyone out on track except for the Ferrari of Sainz and the Red Bull of Perez in 2nd and 3rd, so it's a busy track at the moment. The Williams drivers are the first to put their laps in. Sargent is out, he's in 18th, but Albon through at the moment, up in 12th. Still following Hamilton on this lap, and it's looking quite clean and tidy. Ricciardo puts in his final lap, he moves up to 12th. I'm not sure if that will be enough. He's 7 tenths off. Magnussen as well in 18th, he's out.
Yeah, Verstappen goes 2nd quickest, absolute best first sector, personal best 2nd sector, 1:18.318 seconds. Norris now at risk into 15th place he goes. Tsunoda goes 15th and pushes the McLaren driver down to 16th spot as we go back with Lewis Hamilton here, trying to make himself become a part of qualifying 2, which of course he does. He goes 7th quickest, and Norris just behind him goes into the top 10 right at the end of the session to go through.
And Russell is out. He couldn't improve on his time. He had a poor first sector, so maybe a mistake there, but he's down in 18th, for 10th or 2 off of the cut-off time.
Yeah, and how about that? The one that just got in was Ricciardo on his return to Formula 1, a former race winner of the Hungarian Grand Prix. 15th place, he's just in, but out. In 16th place, Albon. In 17th place, Tsunoda. In 18th, Russell, who was on pole position here last year, remember. Magnussen 19th and Sargent 20th are out. And punching, slamming the desk, we just seen Toto Wolff back at base there, looking absolutely furious, not of course with the performance of Hamilton, but because he's got one Mercedes out towards the back of the field with Russell, who's looked a bit off colour, has to be said, all weekend so far. Let's get the radio.
Don't tell me we're out. Yeah, P18. Guys, could have gone at any point. We're in all that traffic, sector 3.
That's what we said, wasn't it? Traffic could be an issue. It proved to be an issue because so many of them left it so late. Yeah,
it was a real traffic jam in the last sector there, so obviously complaining about that and losing that tyre temperature. Just on board now with Logan Sargent, who was 20th and last, and here's his radio.
Of a lap. I'm so sorry. Oh my God.
Just apologising to the team there. He did clatter the curb quite badly at turn 7, the middle chicane, and that would have cost him a bit of time, but my God, it was really close around the drop zone, literally hundredths of a second separating the field at that point. Now on board of Norris as he's diving up the inside of both an Aston Martin and his teammate to try and get track position going into the last corner. This is all trying to launch a lap. He passes 5 cars in one corner.
One of them, George Russell.
Yeah, just trying to move up the queue, and it's this question again of some drivers feel that there should be a gentleman's agreement to stay in line, to stay in your place in the queue, and other drivers like Lando clearly feel that does not apply. And again, Russell wheel spinning, trying to stop people jumping him, but he's lost 3 positions there in the last 100 metres.
And it's not exactly the ideal exit from the final turn, is it? Surely he was below speed there before he even began the lap.
Yeah, and we saw that he set a yellow sector 1, so not even a personal best. He did then set a decent sector 2 and 3, but that's where he lost his Q2 entrance tickets. So, yeah, frustrating stuff.
Yeah, Ricciardo's time is a 1:18.906 and Russell did a 1:19.027, so it's under a tenth of a second. So Zhou Guanyu quickest in the session, 1:18.143 seconds. Max Verstappen improved late on second, 1:18.318. All of them on the hard tyre, remember. And then Sergio Perez, 1:18.360 in third place. Sainz was 4th. Leclerc was 5th. It wasn't too bad for the Ferraris in the end. Piastri 6th, Hamilton 7th right at the end. He had the 1 lap to get in there. Alonso 8th, Hülkenberg 9th. Norris in 10th place. Also last minute, a second dash for him to get in, but he did a good job. Gasly in 11th, Bottas in 12th, Stroll 13th, Ocon 14th, Ricciardo in 15th place. I think he'll take that. That's a decent return in his first qualifying session since coming back into Formula 1 as a racing driver this season. And then Albon out in 16th, Tsunoda out in 17th, Russell out in 18th, Magnussen 19th, Sargent 20th, out of the session starting at the back as we look forward to Q2.
There'll be some disappointed drivers. We've already heard George Russell on the radio, but I think Daniel Ricciardo should be pretty pumped with getting through to Q2. That's the first time in 4 races that AlphaTauri have made it through into Q2, and would you believe it? It's at the hands of Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, and it's we're getting another replay now of the mess going into the final corner, this time from the Alpine up here. Gasly going 3 wide into the last corner, some of these cars. It's crazy. But yeah, brilliant qualifying from Daniel Ricciardo, but the margin between him and Tsunoda, it was a 100th of a second?
13 thousandths of a second.
13 thousandths of a second. I mean, poor Tsunoda. I mean, yes, okay, he's been out-qualified by Ricciardo on his return, but the margin's so tight there. And it's really made Ricciardo look like the returning hero, hasn't it?
Yeah, and Albon, he's got through to Q2, in fact, he's got through to Q3 for the final, most recent 3 Grand Prix. He missed out by less than that, by 11 thousandths of a second he missed out on. So brave effort from Alex, but he doesn't go through to Q2. So they'll regroup, and now they'll all switch to a bit more of a familiar tyre, because they've all been using this one, at least the medium tyre now they go on to. A bit less traffic, a bit more knowledge of the tyre, so this session should be a bit more settled than the last one. We always knew that was going to be tricky, didn't we, that first session? Yeah, if you ask me, it's a big thumbs up to that new qualifying format. I quite enjoyed that, and it definitely, I think there was a bit of it was down to having that unfamiliar compound, lack of practice time with that. I mean, I don't know, like I say, the last time that we had qualifying simulations or runs on a hard tyre, it's completely foreign
to most of these teams and drivers, and it seemed to catch a few of them out how well it performed. It was warming up quite strongly, only needing really the outlap, and then you could get a really strong time, and that's why we saw so many cars pitting right at the end of the session to get a final run in.
And isn't it interesting, all the drivers that used the hard tyre in that third free practice session all made it through. So
yes.
was it a mistake from Mercedes, for example, not to at least do one run on that hard tyre just to get a bit of data on it?
They'll certainly be talking about it after the session, won't they? So lots to unpack and debrief. I would argue it was more the traffic management at the end, though, from Russell. At that point, really, what can your engineer do? You're looking at a GPS map which is just a mass of dots in one part of the track, so really it's down to the driver then to sort it out.
The incident at turn 13 between Valtteri Bottas and Lance Stroll has been noted for impeding, so we'll be interesting to see if maybe more complainants come forward maybe around that area of the track. What do you reckon?
The issue with that is there's so many moving parts, so many drivers involved, it's hard to apportion blame because it becomes a knock-on effect. I've been in situations like this where you have been called to the stewards room, 5-6 drivers, and you will just blame the next driver along in the queue, and it becomes very difficult to penalise someone in that situation.
In F2, isn't it mostly the whole grid has to go and see the stewards when you're all queuing up?
It's actually in the regulations straight away after the session.
So Q2 underway then. We'll lose another 5 at the end of this 15 minutes. Already the clock ticks down, and down to 14 minutes and 5 seconds. So they will go out and now get familiarised with the medium tyre, which of course is going to play much more of a role when we get to the 70-lap Grand Prix, the 38th Hungarian Grand Prix tomorrow afternoon. We are looking at above the garage of AlphaTauri, with a sign with his name on, Daniel Ricciardo, of course with a huge smile on the face of the photo, and I imagine there's a twinkle in the eye because that was a decent effort, although only, as we said, just a fraction, tiny fraction quicker than his teammate. But those are the minute differences at this level of sport, aren't they? So we're just looking at a graphic saying qualifying head-to-heads: Max Verstappen 7, Sergio Perez 3. I don't think Sergio would be too concerned with trying to beat his teammate necessarily in this session. All he wants to do in this session is get through it, isn't it, after 5 on the trot where he hasn't made it into the top 10. And this was a Grand Prix last year, a Grand Prix weekend last year, where he didn't get into the top 10 either. He was 11th in qualifying last year, missed out by I think it was 11 thousandths of a second.
Yes, but as a driver he will know that just getting through is not enough at this stage, especially with all the hype around Daniel at the moment and all that. He needs to be putting in strong performances. He needs to show the Red Bull bosses why he should stay, not be in survival mode. So I'm sure he'll have that on his mind as well. Both Red Bulls are out at the moment. Perez has just started his flying lap. Of course, it's a purple sector because he's first on the road. But many of the cars are staying in the pit lane, and this is again a legacy of just how many sets of medium tyres they've got, because quite a few cars have used a couple of sets already through practice. You've now got to use one set in this Q2 session at least. Some teams would ideally want to use 2, and then you've got the race to contend with tomorrow, of course, and the medium is looking like a strong race tyre alongside the hard. So yeah, lots of drivers just waiting and saving their chips for later.
Yeah, 4 sets of these this weekend, 4 sets of mediums and only 4 sets of softs in this reduction of tyres that we've got. So this is the balancing act now. Do you save your tyres and risk not getting through, but look forward to the race tomorrow, or do you just throw all your eggs in one basket, make sure you just get the job done and get into that top 10? I guess it depends what happens on your first lap and what situation you end up in with 3 or 4 minutes of the session to go.
The 1:17.6 for Perez, that's actually quite a strong lap time for what we've seen so far. The track should be, as we say, rubbering in nicely. Ocon, the only other driver to go with a lap time at the moment, 4 tenths off the pace, of course, on the same medium compound. And now we have all of the other drivers finding out on track pretty much at the same time, so everybody's in sequence now. Stroll is just about to come across the line, coming into the last corner, staying nice and tight to the apex all the way around, following that long apex, and he pops up into P2, only a couple of tenths behind Perez. So yeah, that 1:17.6 looking not maybe quite as strong there, but the rest of the drivers shaping up at the end of their warm-up procedures, checking their brake temps, tyre temps. They've got all that data on the dash, making sure switch positions are correct and ready to go. and it's Carlos Sainz who's going to be first across the line for this new flurry to start their laps.
Yeah, pole time last year was 1:17.377. In Q2 last year, the best time Max Verstappen was 1:17.703. So we're up on that already. It's around about 44 degrees, the track temperature. It did peak at nearly 50 degrees. It's a hot day at the Hungaroring, 26 degrees. Lots and lots of fans here. It's always a well-attended event. Lots of them trying to watch from underneath the shade of a tree as well if they're not in one of the grandstands to try and get some respite. It's perfectly blue skies up ahead now, not a cloud in the sky. You can hear the onboard from Carlos Sainz, who's looked like he might be in trouble at the start of that session, as Verstappen goes quickest, 1:17.296. Perez down to second. 10 minutes to go. Stroll third, Ocon fourth. We're on board at the moment with Carlos Sainz. He's about halfway around his lap and looking to get a solid lap in here. So pushing on. All looks okay at the moment. Yesterday, in slightly cooler conditions, particularly with Charles Leclerc on board, Jack, it looked a bit of a handful, that car. It looked really loose, but it looks a bit more planted today.
It does, yeah. I mean, the flip side to having a car that's a bit edgy is that the front end is very strong and you can put the nose where you want to. And on board with Carlos there, it did look like he was able to really control the car nicely in that sense. He is a little bit off the pace, half a second off in the middle sector, and he's now 0.6 off with a 1:17.9.
And just behind him, Lando Norris goes into second place. He's at the absolute best middle sector, and he's only 32 thousandths of a second behind Verstappen. And we've seen the McLaren going well on the softs and the mediums so far in practice sessions, so it's not a massive surprise. Replay with Max Verstappen.
And it's a track limits violation on the exit of turn 5, and he has just gone over the edge there. So he loses that time that put him P1. He's got plenty of time, of course, to reinstate himself, but yeah, he's going to have to be a bit more careful next time round.
Looking nice for McLaren right now with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri sitting up there in P1 and P2. They were thinking this might not be a great weekend for them off the back of Silverstone, of course, with that podium and the 4th place as well for Oscar. So looking a little bit more positive than they'd have us believe as we arrived in Hungary.
Lap time deleted for Lance Stroll as well, so here we go again. Right, Lewis Hamilton about to complete a lap, which is okay, puts him into 5th place, 1:17.712. That is almost 4/10 down on the best time, which now stands of Norris. Piastri second, Perez third, Alonso fourth, Hamilton fifth, Zhou Guanyu in 6th, Charles Leclerc 7th, Carlos Sainz in 8th, Hülkenberg and Ocon 9th and 10th at the moment. Bottas, Ricciardo, Gasly, Stroll and Verstappen are out, but there's still 7 minutes and 50 seconds to go. Right, Lance Stroll then, having lost his previous lap time for track limits, as he stayed within the white lines and within the boundaries of the curbs on this lap. Looks pretty good for Lance and the Aston Martin as he comes out of turn 14, sprints for the line, goes on the curb, but it's okay. And the lap time is not great. Not enough to put him up there. Stays in 14th place with a lap time of 1:18.283. It's his best lap, but it's not good enough at the moment.
So we're now seeing some of the cars coming back into the pits and swapping to another set of the medium tyres. Of course, you can use the set of mediums which you used previously, so not brand spanking new, and then put on the shiny rubber for the end of this session when the track will be at its best. And it looks like that's what quite a few of these teams are going to do, if not all of them, as the majority file into the pits.
Yeah, calm before the storm now, isn't it? Because they're all going to go out for the last few minutes and hopefully not trip over each other quite as much as they did previously. But really positive start to Saturday this for the McLarens. 1-2 at the moment. I think it's only Q2, but it's all been pretty good short run, long run pace so far. And those upgrades seem to be doing the trick, don't they, ever since they started to bring them into Grand Prix ago in Austria.
Pretty impressed with Zhou Guanyu at the moment. I know he topped the first part of qualifying, but I thought perhaps he was just enjoying the hard tyre, was wishing he could do the whole qualifying session on the hard tyre, but still managing to stay up there on the medium tyre, currently in P6, whereas his teammate Valtteri is just in that drop zone in P11 and some way back from his teammate, 4/10 or so.
Yeah, it's a very strong performance. I mean, it's been strong overall for the Alfa Romeos this weekend, but Zhou indeed looks very comfortable, so it's good to see. If he could get through to Q3, that would be a major win for the Swiss team. Well, Swiss-Italian, not really sure exactly what to say. But another one who's doing well is Hülkenberg compared to his teammate Magnussen, who got knocked out in Q3, of course. Hulkenberg currently sitting 9th, and again doing a good job of getting the most of that out of that Haas in the qualifying trim.
Yeah, Hulkenberg has definitely, as I mentioned earlier, had the upper hand over his teammate this year at Haas in qualifying. That's now 9-2 in favour of the German driver, the former Le Mans winner. It's a bit more equal in the races, 6-4 head-to-head in race trim in favour of Hulkenberg. Right, Max Verstappen heading back out on a build-up lap at the moment, just making his way through turn 2. At the moment, he's out. Still got 5 minutes, 15 seconds to go, but he's got to get a lap in. He's had one lap. It was a good one. It put him at the top of the times when he posted it, but that track limits offence means it was taken away from him. So shouldn't be any danger here, but he's got to be a little bit circumspect, hasn't he, on this lap?
He does, but he's got out with 5 minutes to go, which means he'll have plenty of time to get at least 2 laps in. So that's the strategy here, I think. Although Perez has just come straight back into the pits. And the only reason that he would have done that, if he did go out on a set of new mediums, would be maybe to scrub them, to scuff the surface ever so slightly. But that's not a very common occurrence in F1. So let's see if Max stays out here and just tries to get a banker in, perhaps.
But that's scrubbing them for tomorrow's race. That's not to come back to you a little later
clarify,
on.
Yeah, some teams feel that if you take that shine off of the surface of the tyre, which is actually effectively a protective layer during transport, it just means you get that grip a little bit sooner coming out of the pits. But you don't often see teams doing it.
Aston Martin are pretty partial to doing that, aren't they? They often like to go out and scrub the tyres and get themselves ready. I never know whether that's a team wish or maybe it's a Fernando Alonso leading the way and asking for that, but they are a team that tend to do that rather a lot. Yes, maybe.
There's a few of them, aren't there?
Could be a Lance Strollism, who knows?
It could be, yes.
But, they do it a lot.
Right, Verstappen has got the track to himself. The only driver out there is about to start a flying lap. He makes it through turn 1, picks up the gears, 5th, 6th, downhill through the right-hand kink, under the bridge, and then down the gears into turn 2, 4th gear, and down to a low speed of about 75 miles an hour, and then heading towards 3 and the end of sector 1. This should be quick, and it's the absolute best first sector time. A 10th up already, Jack.
Yeah, not bad at all, and looking pretty calm and collected in the cockpit. Here's turn 5, where he lost his lap before. He's on the white line, which is perfectly legal, so all geared, clatters the curves at turns 6 and 7. No major issues, keeps it pointing true and straight, and into the really, really meaty part of sector 2, left, right, into the fast turn 11 to finish off the sector. And not any issues there. He's 3.5 tenths up on Bottas in P11, so looking fairly safe. Not his best sector 2, but that's okay. He just wants a banker back on board in the visor cam. You can see that he's playing with the switches going into the final corner, making a few adjustments. Nice and tight to the apex. Looks very, very sensible all over the curves on the exit, and it's up into P2.
Yeah, nearly 6 tenths up on the time he needed to beat to get himself into that top 10. So Verstappen goes second, splits the McLarens. Hulkenberg is the one on the cusp now in 10th place. It's put Ocon out of the running at the moment by a whole 70 thousandths of a second. We're looking at Jos Verstappen, ex-Formula 1 driver, of course, and Max Verstappen's dad, looking as ever pretty hard to read his face, really, as to whether he's pleased with that or not, to be honest.
It didn't look that impressed to me. I think unimpressed with anything other than P1 by half a second, Jossus.
I think that's a fair enough point.
Red Bull made Max's life nice and easy there because he's come out before the flurry of all the other drivers who've come out, obviously the ones further down the order. So he had a nice chance to get that banker in, as they like to refer to them, back at the Austrian Grand Prix, which Sergio Perez was unable to do back then. But that was a nice banker for Max. Might not be P1, but just out at a nice time for him. Nice clear track.
Yeah, what he's trying to avoid, especially, is what we're seeing now with some of the other cars, is that traffic jam in the last sector where everybody tries to back up and get their own piece of track. Stroll, one of the first to cross the line now to start that final lap. He'll be keen to try and join his teammate Alonso in Q3 as it looks at the moment. A little bit of a wiggle coming out of turn 2, but not a problem for him. He collects it all, uses all the track through the first sector, and he's a 10.5 down on Hulkenberg for that drop zone position, so it's not looking great at the moment. He's going to have to claw something back here.
No, and the second sector is the one that seems to make the biggest difference. You can be up, you can be just slightly behind at the end of sector 1, but through sector 2, which takes in turns 4 through to 11, the middle flowing part of the lap, That's where you can lose a lot of time, and this is the key one now. Stroll's down here on Hulkenberg. He's unlikely to be able to get it back, but he's had a really good one, a personal best sector, and he's up on the time of Hulkenberg by 64 thousandths of a second. He goes past the McLaren of Piastri as he's building up to go onto a flying lap. So too Perez gets out of the way, but all distractions you don't need really as he comes through turns 12, 13 and now 14. Stroll did enough here for now to get himself into the top 10. No, he loses out by just over a tenth of a second. He improves his time, but it's 13th place. And Hulkenberg goes 4th.
Yeah, fantastic time from Hulk there, and doing his best to get that Haas as high up as he can. And Ricciardo just missing out on a Q2 appearance, potentially 2,000ths of a second down. He's in 11th position at the moment. Zhao goes up to P6 this time.
And Hamilton goes second, so Norris is fastest, Hamilton second, Verstappen third, Piastri fourth, Hulkenberg fifth, Perez sixth. Guan Yu Zhou in 7th. Change it all because Valtteri Bottas has just shot at the times. The checker flag comes out. He goes into 4th place with that. Sainz is 10th at the moment and on the cusp, and Leclerc is out as it stands in 11th place currently. Ocon's on a good lap, absolute best first sector time. He's 14th at the moment. Can he get through? He's about to come across the line. No, he just misses out. 11th place for Ocon, but we've got Sainz at risk and Leclerc out at the moment. Leclerc comes out of the final corner. He's got to do this now or never. Over the line he comes just in time, and he goes 6th quickest, but that puts his teammate Carlos Sainz out of the top 10 by 2,000ths of a second. Alonso on the cusp in 10th place. One happy Ferrari driver, one not. How about that? So Norris quickest, Hamilton second, Verstappen third, Bottas fourth, Piastri fifth. Leclerc just gets through in terms of the time he had left to do it. 6th place, Hulkenberg 7th, Perez gets through into the final part of qualifying for the first time in a long time. 8th place, Zhou Guan Yu in 9th. Good effort, both of the Alphas up there in the top 10, and Alonso in 10th place. Out, Sainz, Ocon, Ricciardo, Stroll and Gasly.
And Pierre Gasly's had his time deleted, so that's P15 for him. He'll be disappointed with that, I'm sure. A thing or two to say about track limits from some of the drivers this afternoon. That's a big shock for Carlos Sainz, but in terms of good news, Daniel Ricciardo should be pretty pumped by that P13 result for him, out-qualifying his teammate on the first chance and getting into Q2 for AlphaTauri, potentially looking at scoring a point maybe tomorrow afternoon. What a comeback. That
would be something, wouldn't it? I mean, he has done a good job. You know, the Aston and the Alpine both look like stronger cars this weekend than the AlphaTauri, and Stroll and Gasly didn't have the cleanest session there, but Ricciardo doing a good job just to put everything together and basically get the most out of that car, which is exactly what that team needs right now, to try and prey on the mistakes of others to get those points that they so desperately need in the team's championship right now.
And Alfa Romeo are going to be absolutely chuffed with that, aren't they, as we get team radio from Sainz.
2,000s only. Oh, come on. No track limits for anyone.
So Carlos Sainz has been told there by his Ferrari engineer that he's only lost out by 2,000ths because he's only 2,000ths behind Fernando Alonso, who's 10th. But what the Ferrari engineer is not telling him is that Alonso aborted his final lap because he didn't need to finish it, just try and save the tyres, didn't have to stress him through the last corner, came into the pits instead of completing the lap. So it's not quite true that he only missed out by 2,000ths.
How about that for how tight it is on the fringe? 9th was Zhou Guan Yu, 1:17.7. Alonso 1:17.701. Sainz out in 11th, 17.703. 3,000ths of a second between 9th, 10th and 11th.
Yeah, quite remarkable around such a long track. 5 point something kilometres of twists and turns, and those are the margins that we're talking about. It's incredible, but yep, it'll be interesting to see how the final part of quali plays out on the soft tyre finally, the juiciest of all compounds.
Can't wait to see that.
All right, we'll keep building, and I'll keep learning. Thank you.
And actually that is a good spot to start learning from, P13. If he was dead last or not getting through to Q2, that would be a frustration, but actually P13 is something you can work with, and he's obviously got a bit of learning already in these 3 practice sessions.
It's also, let's be frank, it's justification for Red Bull's decision. Some people thought it looked harsh on Nick De Vries to dump him after 10 races, but he wasn't performing against Yuki Tsunoda. Okay, Ricciardo only out-qualified Tsunoda by a tiny margin, but he did do it, something that's De Vries only managed twice in 12 qualifying sessions if you include the sprints. So you can't really argue with the decision that they've made to come straight into a new car and out-qualify your teammate, even if it is only, in inverted commas, Yuki Tsunoda. That's reasonably impressive, even if we know he's a quality driver.
It absolutely is. I mean, it's just what Daniel would have been aiming for. But I can't stress enough to those at home, the margin of time that we're talking about here, it was, thousandths of a second, 13 thousandths of a second. If you were to measure that out at the finish line as they cross the line, it's centimeters at hundreds of miles an hour. It's just insane how close these margins are. If Ricciardo had coughed the wrong way during that lap, he might have been behind Tsunoda, and it would be a very different story. But this is what counts. Is the optics look that way for a reason. He did beat him, and that's how it is.
Have you used that excuse before to your team bosses? I coughed, I'm so sorry, into turn one, I'm sorry.
I was going to say...
he is going to now.
He's a racing driver. He's used every excuse he can find, right?
The book is a thick one, yeah, that's for sure.
A tome.
Yeah, I've definitely used some interesting excuses. Can't say I've used that one yet, but maybe I will in the future.
Yeah, keep it in your locker, ready for safekeeping. I'm interested by the Aston Martin's performance today, with Lance Stroll qualifying P14 and then Fernando just getting into Q3. When we arrived in Hungary, the chat was that this track was going to suit them a little bit better, but it doesn't seem to be. Is it because of this tyre allocation, Andrew, do you think?
You asked me about Aston.
Always.
We haven't got a definitive read on Aston because we don't know where Alonso would have qualified with that final lap. So I think let's hold our horses on Aston Martin for now. What I would say is that Alfa Romeo have been really impressive this weekend. They've had an upgrade on their car for the last couple of races, which hasn't really delivered for them at the high-speed tracks, but they were hopeful that it would work more effectively as a lower speed track like the Hungaroring, and so far it's really impressive. And Jack, you were saying, are they Swiss, are they Italian? Actually, now they're German, because this is effectively the Audi works team, as will be in 2026. Now, Sauber, Alfa Romeo, whatever you want to call them, so far this season they've looked like they've got a lot of work to do to become Audi by 2026, because there's no way Audi are going to want to be coming into Formula One with the second slowest car on the grid. But this will please the management that they've made this step forward this weekend so far.
It's going to be interesting to see how they go on the soft tyre. They ran it in FP3 earlier on today, but they didn't touch it yesterday, so they were comfy on the medium. We've just seen that play out in Q2, both Valtteri and Joe making it through to the final part of qualifying. But it will be interesting to see that softer tyre, what they can do with that. When I'm talking about Audi, I'm sure that both Valtteri and Guan Yu Zhou would like to be there come that changeover.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure either of them will be there.
No, I know. That's why I say would like.
But it's job done for them in a sense, because Bottas, best qualifying this year, 10th in Miami. So he's going to at least equal that. It's only the second time he's got through to the final part of qualifying. And for his teammate, Zhou Guanyu, his best qualifying of the year, 12th in the second round of the season in Saudi Arabia. So whatever happens, he's going to be on for a personal best this year. Decent effort.
Just looking now, with less than a minute to go before lights out in this final part of qualifying, and we've already got a queue forming at the end of pit lane with Perez in theoretical pole position, Alonso just behind him, a few other cars taking the covers off and getting ready to go out. And this is all because they want to avoid being last in the queue and suffering that reverse concertina effect in the last corners, where everybody backs up and you have to slow right down and crawl through as you wait for everyone to start their flying lap. Being first in the queue is actually prime position in that sense.
And yet, would you like to go in the gap, or it's too tricky now?
It just means that you're potentially going to be in a bit of a rush to get that final set out. Depends, most of these teams will have more than enough sets of soft to get them through this session, with it being not really the favourable tyre for the race. Going in the gap, which is what Max basically did in the previous part of quali, does make a lot of sense though with the way things are playing out.
Sort of at the start of the gap, or the end of the gap, I think Max went, didn't he? Just as everyone else was coming out, he was finishing off that lap.
That would be the ideal, wouldn't it? Yeah, and you can sync up then with the rest of the field as they come out on their set. But it looks like the majority are going to go out straight away.
Yeah, shiny new, brand spanking new soft tyres on Charles Leclerc's Ferrari. He's just being released from the garage. World champion Max Verstappen about to come out of the pit lane. So Charles Leclerc just behind him, about to go out. It was a good effort from Leclerc. He was just over 2 tenths down on the fastest time, despite the fact he was almost out of that session. It was a pretty good lap in the end. He was well in terms of time. It was just very, very last minute. But the Ferrari in, and the sole remaining Ferrari. So we've got Norris and Piastri. We've got both of the McLarens. We've got both of the Red Bulls, Verstappen and Perez. We've got both of the Alphas, Bottas and Zhou. We've got one Mercedes, Hamilton. We've got one Aston Martin with Alonso as well. And we've got one Haas with Hülkenberg in the mix. So an interesting look to the top 10. 10 minutes and 20 seconds left to go. And let's see what we should see some much quicker lap times now, of course. So they've all got to run the soft tyre, which they would have run anyway in this qualifying session, as Perez is the first to try and set a lap time on the run down to turn 1.
Really, really nice apex at the first corner, getting a little bit of a wiggle on traction, but otherwise looking pretty neat and tidy, really. Going down into turn 2 now, the car's always trying to get away from you, and it slips at the front, always understeering a bit, but he gets through, carries nice speed, bottoms a little bit through the compression at turn 3. First man to set a benchmark in the first sector, so he is of course purple. Across the curbs on the exit of turn 4, sparks flying, not using all of the curb, but he does on the exit of turn 5, getting right over the white line but staying within the track limits. It's very nice. Clatters through the curbs. Very, very sharp turn into turn 8, really aggressive from the car there, but he managed to keep the rear in line. Coming up to turn 11 very fast, corner this, and again using a lot of curb on the exit but staying within the white lines. Even getting onto the entry curve, braking for turn 12, passing his teammate Verstappen into the last sector. He gets out of the way very nicely for him through the last couple of corners. His first sector time has already been surpassed, so it's potentially not the best at the moment, but he's through the last corner now and sets the benchmark.
1:17.142 seconds. The driver that went quicker than him in the first sector was Mr. L. Norris with a 27.925. So the McLaren quicker than the Red Bull through the first sector, but it's that second sector that is really key. And Lando is in that sector at the moment, and he goes purple in that sector as well. He's 2.5 tenths up on Perez. 0.254 seconds quicker through the first 2 sectors in the McLaren, and Charles Leclerc is on a lap as well. He's just gone quicker than Norris through sector 1, so the Ferrari pushing here, but Lando Norris just coming out of the final turn here. This should be top of the times for now for Lando. He goes over the line, and it is quickest by just over 2 tenths of a second. 1:16.904.
He's loved that middle sector, hasn't he, today in the McLaren, Lando Norris? Really seeming to suit him in the car.
And it's now Verstappen who goes purple in sector 1. Meanwhile, we're on board with Leclerc, who's coming through the last sector now. It's not looking too bad at all, using a lot of curb on the exit of 13 and 14, staying nice and tight on the throttle. It's looking not too bad for him, and he jumps up to P4 with 1:17.1, just behind Perez.
Yeah, Fernando Alonso has gone second quickest meanwhile, 0.139 seconds down. So it is McLaren, Norris from Aston Martin, Alonso, and Red Bull, Perez. They're the top 3. Leclerc 4th, Bottas in 5th, Hülkenberg in 6th, and push them all down 1 because Verstappen, absolute best 3rd sector. To add to the absolute best 1st sector, he goes to the top of the times by nearly 3 tenths of a second. Hamilton about to come over the line now as well, goes second quickest, 1:16.738. So 1:16.6 for Verstappen, 1:16.7 for Hamilton in 2nd, and a 1:16.9 for Norris in 3rd place. Alonso 4th, Perez 5th, Leclerc 6th, Bottas 7th, Hülkenberg 8th, Piastri 9th, and Zhou Guanyu in 10th place after the first set of runs with 7 minutes to go.
We all talk about what who the contender is for P2 at the moment. At the moment, we've got Mercedes and McLaren and Aston Martin, of course, Perez there, but then the Ferrari. It is so hard to call every single race weekend who's going to be challenging for that P2 spot.
Well, it's not even that big a gap between Verstappen and the rest at the moment. I mean, it's just over a tenth, and Hamilton's clearly enjoying this track and the car at the moment. He's really, really strong in sector 2. He was quicker than Verstappen and just lost out a bit at sectors 1 and 3. So, you know, he could put a lap together here in the second part of quali, and he might challenge Verstappen. You never know.
Yeah, as well as having the most wins around here, he's got the most ever pole positions around here, Lewis Hamilton, with 8 wins, 8 poles, 11 podiums. We're looking at a fairly calm-looking Zak Brown, CEO of McLaren, on the pit wall, with Norris in 3rd place. Piastri in 9th place doing a decent job as well. So just over a 1/10 of a second between the top two, Verstappen and Hamilton, and then almost 3/10 off the pace in third, Norris.
Hamilton just coming back into the pits now, and I love seeing the fact that there are 7 different teams in the 10. Don't you love that? There's the spread and how other teammates haven't managed to make it through, and you spoke about that earlier, didn't you, Jack, that some teammates were able to make the tyres work, some not, just across the different teams, and here we are, 7 different teams in the top 10. Going to make for quite an exciting grid tomorrow.
Yeah, and with some quick drivers further back, not least of which George Russell is going to be starting the race in 18th place. You can overtake here. We saw back in '89, Mansell went from 12th on the grid in the dry. Jenson Button went here, but on a dry, wet to dry track, from 14th on the grid to get his first ever Formula 1 win. So it's going to be tough, isn't it? You can do it, but they're going to have to look at maybe a different strategy, aren't they, to get George Russell out there?
Yeah, it is famously a difficult track to overtake on, even with the recent advent of DRS. Really where the opportunities could come is with tyre management, particularly if it's hot. It's a track that really works the tyres hard, and towards the end of your stint you can really make a difference there, either by overcutting or undercutting, even overtaking on track if someone really overdoes it with their tyres. But now with just under 5 minutes to go, usually you'd expect everyone to come out for one final push on the soft. That's usually all it's good for, and for that you only need to come out of pit lane with about 1:40 to go to be safe. But will we see some people coming out to run in the gap, as we mentioned earlier, the famous gap? It's a pretty attractive strategy if it's going to get congested later on.
It's something the Formula 2 drivers like to do, isn't it? That running in the gap. It's much more in that particular championship that we talk about it. Not so much in Formula 1, but we are tending to see it a little bit more now.
I mean, in F2, you just want to avoid everyone else as much as possible, I think. I'm talking from experience there, nothing against the current crop. And indeed, we're getting the Red Bull coming out now. That's Verstappen, and it's a Ferrari as well that's going to follow him out. So they are going to try and take advantage of the clear track here.
Yeah, the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. 6, but more than half a second off the pace at the moment. That's not great, is it?
They do look like they're still struggling, those Ferraris, so I don't think Leclerc's going to be a factor for pole or even the podium positions, as it were, this afternoon, but we'll see.
We're seeing quite a few of them heading out now, both the Red Bulls, the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc and Nico Hülkenberg. Jack, if you were thinking you might go then, and then you see other cars heading out, do you then change your strategy, do you think, or do you have to stay true to it at this point because there's such little time on the clock, 3 minutes and 17 seconds?
I think you're committed. You're going to have to deal with it. I mean, they have the advantage in this session that only half the grid are participating, so only 10 cars on track. So realistically, you should be able to find your own piece of track. But once you're out of the garage, that's it. You've got to go and just make the best of it. And the drivers on this warm-up lap, they do have the ability to slow down and speed up by about 5 to 10 seconds and play with their position like that. And you're reacting to the other drivers around you whilst trying to bring those tyres up to temperature and not overdo it. So it's a fine balance.
So Max Verstappen looking for his 8th pole position of the year, and the one that looks most likely to disrupt him, as he did in practice this morning, is Lewis Hamilton. But a 1/10 of a second, can he find it? You feel it might need the perfect lap from Hamilton and maybe just a slightly off colour lap from Verstappen, but it is possible. Everybody else, based on the performances in the first runs, look a little bit more unlikely to threaten the current championship leader for that pole position.
And Max Verstappen has let the Ferrari go ahead of him, so slowing down enough for Charles Leclerc to blast past. This is the sound of Lando Norris's McLaren, currently in P3. Just watching his mechanics looking a little nervous, arms crossed in front of them. Will they be held aloft if Lando can get the pole position this afternoon?
They look nervous, but they also look kind of happily expectant, don't they, after what happened 2 weeks ago at Silverstone. And, front row might be good enough if he can get the start that he got in Britain 2 weeks ago, because he got straight into the lead of the race there. Right, Charles Leclerc. Big lap then from Leclerc with the Ferrari. Track to himself. He's got one down at turn 2, but he won't be able to catch that car, so into turn 1 he goes. It should be a clear lap, this. Hits the apex, goes on the exit. This is the curves, not too bad, up through the gears, down the hill, and on the way into turn 2. Tidy. The car looks like it's handling okay. It doesn't look like it's too much of a handful so far, but we'll really get to find out what the balance is like in this middle sector coming up next, Jack.
Yeah, he looks pretty comfortable with that now. He's got a handle on the behaviour of the car. He's just under a tenth down on the Verstappen sector 1 time, so not too bad, but he's lost a bit of time. As you say, the meat of the lap is sector 2 really, and we go on board as he goes through the chicane in the middle of the lap. Again, nice and tidy. He's pulled his driving back a little bit now, so he's sort of playing more to the strengths of the Ferrari, letting the rotation come to him, not forcing it too much. Verstappen hasn't had the best sector 1. It's not bad, but it's not a personal best. Watching the fact now, he's just over a tenth down still in sector 2, so this is an okay lap from the Ferrari.
Verstappen has just put in the best second sector time though, and has gone just under 2/10 quicker. He's on course for an improved lap here to build the gap over himself and Lewis Hamilton. While the Ferrari sprints for the line, Leclerc goes through and he goes up to 4th place, 1 minute 16.992. Alonso has had 2 personal bests as well. He's the one that's dropped down to 5th place now, but Verstappen comes through first and he's 20 thousandths of a second down on his own time. But Piastri in the McLaren has just set the absolute best middle sector time. Here comes Fernando Alonso. Can he get himself back onto the second row of the grid? He's 5th at the moment. No, he can't improve upon that. But Norris is the one to watch next, as he's had 2 personal bests. He comes out of the final corner. He's 3rd at the moment. Can he get himself on the front row of the grid? Yes, he can. He goes 2nd. 82 thousandths of a second down on Verstappen.
And we're now looking at Hamilton. He's the last one that's going to come across the line. He's a 10th up coming through sector 2, and he's going into turn 12, the last sector. He's got 2 corners left. It's clean through the exit of 12, not even on the AstroTurf, just on the concrete, nice and tight. Little bit of a wiggle at the apex, but it's not too bad. He's carried a lot of speed, nice and calm on the entry for the last corner. Wiggle again at the apex. He's fighting that Mercedes.
And Hamilton comes over the line and goes quickest, pole position by 3 thousandths of a second. What a lap! Fans in the grandstands get to their feet and applaud the 7-time world champion, who already had the record for pole positions here at the Hungaroring. That's pole position number 9 at this circuit, and he's done it by 3 thousandths of a second. That is the closest gap in qualifying that we've had between the top 2 all year long.
And it is a terrible day for Sergio Perez. He might have made it through to Q3, but my goodness me, P9 for the Mexican driver. He needed a solid weekend. He needed to be up there with his teammate. He will start from P9 for tomorrow's race. Not a good afternoon, not a good weekend now for Sergio Perez.
And Toto Wolff, who the first part of qualifying was slamming the desk, come back to that.
Get in there, Lewis. That's P1, mate. Beautiful work. Top lad.
Get in there, let's go, boys! Oh god, that's so good. Thanks so much for the hard work, guys.
Kudos to you, mate. Awesome lap, that one.
Well, great conversation there between his race engineer Bono and Lewis Hamilton. First pole position of the season for Lewis Hamilton.
It's his first pole position since Saudi Arabia 2021, the penultimate race of that titanic battle with Max Verstappen. It's a massive achievement for him. I'm sure he's going to be thrilled.
Absolutely right. Well, he dug deep for that one. That was a fantastic lap from Hamilton to take pole position here. Verstappen beaten by 3 thousandths of a second. It's a Mercedes on pole position. It's a Red Bull second, and a McLaren up there in 3rd place with Lando Norris. And Oscar Piastri under the radar in that session. Great effort, 4th place.
I mean, it's hard because so much was going on in that last lap, but yeah, great result for both of the McLarens. They were not too far back from the battle for first. Actually, Norris was less than a tenth from pole himself.
An incredible effort for Lewis Hamilton, but also a huge effort from Zhou Guanyu, P5 for the Chinese driver in the Alfa Romeo. A serious turn of form. His teammate a couple of places back, P7 for Valtteri Bottas. So a Ferrari-powered car there, the Alfa Romeo, ahead of the Works team, Charles Leclerc in that Works Ferrari. So big day for Alfa Romeo, big chance to score some big points tomorrow afternoon. But my goodness me, can't believe we've got the same 4 drivers in the top 4 spots as we did at Silverstone a couple of weeks back. My goodness, it's been a while since we've heard Bono on the radio to Lewis Hamilton saying get in there, isn't it?
Yeah, amazing that. And for Zhou Guanyu as well, it's his best ever qualifying that. So excellent effort by him to be in 5th place. So Hamilton fastest, Verstappen 2nd, Norris 3rd, Piastri 4th, Guanyu in 5th, Leclerc 6th, Bottas 7th. Alpha's great day for them. Best qualifying of the year for Bottas as well. Alonso in 8th place. I think he'd probably be a bit disappointed with that. Perez, well, bittersweet. It's not great, is it, 9th place, but it's better than it has been. And Hulkenberg in 10th place in that session.
I think Perez is in trouble here. I mean, I have to agree, we got wrapped up in the excitement for the fight for pole, but Perez is nowhere in comparison. I mean, Verstappen more than ever is going to need his teammate tomorrow. They're going to need to have all the cards to play that they possibly can in strategy against Hamilton and the McLarens, because strategy will be the deciding factor tomorrow.
So just doing the usual procedures, Lewis Hamilton on the way in, and just to his right, taking a drink, taking the fluids on board. And what's a hot day is Max Verstappen, who looks a bit nonplussed by all this. I mean, it's not a disaster second place, but he always wants to be on pole position.
I'm looking forward to the start of the race already. The two drivers, Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, going down into turn one. Goodness me.
And which two cars had the best starts in Silverstone? The Papaya McLarens.
Absolutely right. Could be a really interesting one, this. Shortly we'll get to hear from the drivers as well in the post-qualifying interviews, and they're just having a breather before they have their media duties.
Lando, excellent job out there, P3. You guys were a little skeptical coming into this race that maybe this new update wasn't going to be as effective in these mid-speed corners because you guys were so fast at Silverstone. Tell me about how that's translated here. Are you surprised?
A little bit. I'm disappointed, I guess. Yeah, if you're doing within a tenth of pole, it feels like you should be on pole if you put the lap together, you know. So I guess as an overall picture, I'm happy. The team did a good job, P3 and P4 for both of us. So a good weekend so far, but as a driver, I'm not the happiest. I feel like I made too many mistakes, and that cost me today.
Okay, well, you baited it. You said disappointed. So what was it that you felt like could have been different? Was there a corner, was something that could have been different for you to be able to get that last 10?
There's always little things, you know, just putting the lap together. It wasn't the cleanest. I guess there's always an element of risk involved in trying to push it a little bit more, but nothing major. Just, I don't know how much it was between me and P1, but if it's a 10th, there's definitely a 10th in it. So yeah, frustrating, but I'm happy. P3 still is a good position for tomorrow, so still a good day.
Well, you guys have been on a roll, so what are your thoughts moving into the race? And this is going to require a lot of you, but of the car and the tires, do you feel like the car is up for the long runs? Obviously, it's pretty fast.
It's no, I'm good. I'm excited. I think the race pace yesterday and on Friday was pretty strong, just as strong as we probably were in Silverstone. So I'm excited. Just difficult track to overtake, which is probably why I'm a bit more frustrated than I normally would be. But yeah, I'm up there with the good guys. We've got two cars up there, so hopefully we can use them and get some good points tomorrow.
Well, there was a moment with George Russell in Q1 where it was just about there being so much traffic all around. How do you get through that tomorrow and having lap traffic and things on track? It's clearly an issue here.
That's an issue for tomorrow. So.
Issue for them.
Yeah, I mean, we did a good job today. That's all I care about. Tonight we focus for tomorrow.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
Max, good job. You went back out there and didn't go any quicker. Can you tell us what happened on that last time out?
Not much happened. I've been struggling the whole weekend to find a good balance. Every session has been up and down. Today also in qualifying, really difficult. Q1, Q2 to just feel confident to really attack corners. I thought my first one in Q3 was quite good, but then second run again, no feeling. Tried to push a little bit more. You lose the rear, lose the front. So I think, pretty. I mean, we're still second, but I think we should be ahead with the car we have normally. But so far this weekend, I think we haven't been on it.
So what is it that you think that you need more than one end? Do you need the front more, or do you need the back more for tomorrow's race?
Depends a bit on the temperature. I mean, it's going to be quite hot, so normally rear tires, are always going to be quite difficult. I think for the race, everything settles down a bit more. But I would have just hoped to have a little bit more of a, fun balance in qualifying to really attack it.
You guys came with a new update. Do you feel it's effective or maybe not?
I think the update works, but I think we just didn't really put everything together setup-wise because I think today was just been all over the shop and not exactly where we wanted to be.
Well, a bad day at P2 is not too bad. Good luck. I don't even need to say anything. They went 10 times this mad when you took the pole. You sounded like you were out of breath. Was that out of breath or was that just super excited?
I think both. It's been a crazy year and a half, so I've lost my voice from shouting so much in the car. It's amazing, that feeling. I feel so grateful to be up here because the team have worked so hard. We've been pushing so hard over this time to finally get a pole. It just feels like the first time. So, and a big thanks to the crowd here. We have such an amazing crowd every year here in Budapest. Wow. I was really not... I didn't expect coming today that we'd be fighting for pole. So when I went into that last run, I gave it absolutely everything. There was nothing left in it.
I feel like I can hear the emotion in your voice, and I'm curious for you to explain what that journey's been like to get back to the top again.
Oh, it's been massively challenging for every single person in the team. You know, there's been ups and downs. It's a big roller coaster ride. But none of us have lost faith. We've all just united together. We're focusing on trying to steer the car into the direction. Today we were losing so much in turn 4 and turn, not so much, but time in turn 4 and 11 compared to the others. So I just sent it and hoped that I stayed on track. And but it has been tough, and it's going to continue to be tough moving on from here. But I think hopefully this shows that we're on the right track and we can do it if we just keep pushing.
Was there a big difference between the hard, the medium, and the soft in the car?
Yeah, big difference in balance. But all the tyres actually generally felt quite good. And right at the end, the soft tyre felt extraordinary. And it's just interesting just how you have to prep the tyres. And for us finally having a relatively neutral, calm balance through the corners. Through corner balance is very difficult to get right with these type of cars. And I think we did that today. So hats off to the team. We did a great job.
Give us a little insight. You win the race tomorrow. What's the emotion going to be like then?
Oh, geez. I just have to try and see if I can sleep tonight. I think tomorrow we'll study as hard as we can. We'll bring our A game tomorrow as a team. And I mean, it's going to be difficult to fight these two guys. You know, Lando's been doing a mega job. It's been great to see McLaren up there battling. And Max, Max, he's always up there. He's always doing his thing.
Well, one final question. You criticized the limited amount of tires and maybe that this wasn't the right way to go for qualifying, but you're on the pole. So do you like this format?
I wouldn't say that it was criticizing. It was just giving a point of view. I think, all these amazing people turn up on a Friday and want to see cars running around, and we have less tires than normal. But the wet tires... there's a lot of wet tires they throw away on the weekend, and that's what we need to figure out how we can do better there rather than reduce the entertainment for the fans. So I just meant on that day.
He loves you guys. Cheer for him.
Love you guys.
Congrats. Good luck.
That was your pole sitter for the Hungarian Grand Prix, Sir Lewis Hamilton, talking to Danica Patrick. And behind him on the grid tomorrow will be Max Verstappen, the reigning world champion, and then Lando Norris completing the top 3 in the McLaren. Well, that's all we've got time for on this qualifying afternoon for the Hungarian Grand Prix. My thanks to Andrew Benson, Chris Hartley and Jack Aitken. We will be live tomorrow from 1:45 on the BBC Sport website, getting ready for the Hungarian Grand Prix. You can also check out the Checkered Flag podcast. We'll be giving our thoughts on this rather amazing qualifying session, especially for Lewis Hamilton a little later on. So that will be available later today. Hopefully you'll join us tomorrow at 1:45. We'll be on the BBC Sport website. Have a great evening. Hopefully you'll sleep better than Lewis Hamilton. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.